right. Welcome, everybody, to the Distill Buildings podcast.
Where buildings are stirred, shaken, and data-driven.
Awesome. So I'm your host, Jason Shearer.
I'm your host, AK.
And today, so this is the second episode. You guys heard our intro episode a couple of weeks ago. So today we're going to jump right into a bourbon tasting and then get you guys into an interview with the one and only Andrew Liu from Cisco Systems. So what are we drinking today, AK?
We're drinking Old Soul. This was actually a gift from you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this bourbon?
Yeah. So Old Soul is the bourbon brand of Cathead Distillery here in Jackson, Mississippi. Like a lot of distilleries, Cathead started out in quick spirits, so distilling vodka and gin and other, like I'd say, simple or quick spirits, and then of course as they built up their stock of distilled spirits, they got into bourbon. And this is, under their, sort of their bourbon brand. Like a lot of bottle shops, Fondren Cellars, which is here local to me, they do a lot of, private selections or barrel selections from local distilleries, as well as like distilleries, around the country or the Southeast. So this is a 2022 private barrel selection from Fondren Cellars. I really like it because it's uncut. It is cask strength. So I think, this one's pretty hot. So this is 120 proof bourbon, so 60.41. So it's a pretty good
That's
bourbon.
Right.
Yeah, so let's give it a try. Cheers.
So do you dilute it a little bit?
Nope, I don't dilute it at all. I do serve it over ice like I do most drinks. But even over ice, like it's kind of a sneaky 120 proof bourbon. Like it does not. Yeah, it'll sneak up on you for sure.
It's delicious actually, and I think the flavor profile is so strong. Even though I put a lot of ice in mine, and it's still it's very, very delicious.
Yep, very drinkable, and it definitely has it's not too hot on the tongue, and it kind of has a good toffee flavor to it. And if you look at the color, like it's a really rich amber color bourbon. I tend to like bourbons that are like a little darker in color.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. So for the audience, we're going to bring in Andrew, the expert at POE and FMP. This is going to be a great episode.
Yep, and this is kind of a first of a couple of episodes focused on POE and fault managed power. So we'll have a few other experts through the months of June and July for our audience to listen to.
Yeah, and since this is going to be our second episode, some of our audience probably need to know what POE means, power over Ethernet, and then what FMP is fault managed power. We're going to let Andrew kind of describe what that means to the audience.
All right, awesome. So we're joined by Andrew Liu today of Cisco Systems. Thanks for hopping on with us, Andrew.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, AK.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do at Cisco. I know you've had a couple of tours of duty, but what's your current role?
This is actually my third stint at Cisco, but I've been on the go-to-market side for everything in the campus wireless routing, switching. Then I became I was a proper product manager for the Khalis switching side on looking at power delivery, actually in smart buildings. And that was my second tour. In my third tour coming back, my intent is to actually incubate smart building ecosystem and along with power distribution technologies within Cisco, and that is FMP plus POE.
That's awesome. Why don't you tell the audience about your story of the FMP plus POE and license plate That was fascinating.
Yeah, there is a license plate in a certain truck story here, right?
Am I allowed to say what kind of truck do I drive?
I think so. It's okay.
You could say whatever
I
you
don't
want.
think Elon will mind. Yeah.
All right, all right. So, I drive a Cybertruck with the license plate that says FMP plus POE. And the reason behind that is actually it's definitely a technology story, right? The Cybertruck is the first, I want to say, car with 48-volt power distribution within the vehicle, and with Ethernet replacing the traditional, I believe, CAN bus for in-vehicle communications. So if you squint hard enough, it's a PoE truck.
Awesome.
And
Like
yeah,
for vehicle power, like traditionally that's like a 12-volt DC system, right? Like just like
yes,
ICE engine vehicles.
yes. And that actually, so I know about this going in, but it still came as a little bit of a surprise when you get the cigarette lighter phone charger that you try to plug in and you can't find a a connection anywhere. Uh,
That's very
um,
interesting. That's a lot of dedication. So how does that translate to the building side?
Great question. We want to do what Tesla did to the car, to the buildings, because buildings today are still on Modbus, BACnet, various, let's say, legacy protocols and transports. We want the building to be powered by FMP plus PoE.
Cool. I think that's a good differentiator too. And like it's like your license plate doesn't say like FMP, or PoE. Like it's a combination of the technologies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it has to be.
And Andrew, you mentioned that PoE in specific or FMP. Why not DC systems? Or you did not mention anything about other technologies. You're specifically talking about PoE and FMP. What makes those technologies stand out in the building system?
It's the safety aspect. I think FMP is a representation of, I believe, what you would call class 4 in the electrical code in the United States. PoE is a representation of class 2 in the same category. These are, I think, power limited circuits. These can both are touch safe, ground safe, and they complement each other in capabilities, reach, and also data capabilities, right? I think FMP as is still at its starting point in terms of technology. There needs to be a little bit more, I think, development, and more importantly, a little bit more scale to this technology that will end up, I think, drastically reduce its cost and also increase its applicability. I also FMP today is limited to 450 volts. I think there's possibility of that voltage going higher, where you end up basically just having touch safe power throughout the building.
Interesting.
Now, this is, I always say I'm an engineer at heart, but I do have a little bit of marketing in my responsibilities. FMP plus PoE, I believe, is a simple enough message to get out there. It's not my intention to actually exclude other DC technologies, right? You mentioned these DC systems. I don't know if it's referring to like the Schneider subsidiary in the Netherlands. No, but
Yeah, I meant the technology.
yeah, but in that, I think right now it is a blue ocean for all DC technologies, including DC systems. Right? There's definitely if like we talked a little bit before about the my donut of DC viability. Just to explain for your audience, right? if we think about the if we think about DC distribution or power distribution within the building, at the center of the donut, that is your artery that carries about, let's say, hundreds of kilowatts or maybe even megawatts. And then at the outside of the donut, that's your very, very small appliances. Could be your AAA battery charger that consumes 5 to 10 watts. Could be an access point, right? So in between, it's this basically the channels to carry electricity reduces, or the circuit size reduces, while the connection or the endpoint increases. Each step, the cost of the endpoints, because the power consumption is smaller and smaller, the value of the endpoints are getting less and less. But on the other hand, the labor to actually connect all of these endpoints is going higher and higher because the endpoints are increasing in numbers, which gives you a interesting, I want to say, zone of viability for the technology that looks like a donut. Because in the center, where it's megawatts or hundreds of kilowatts, FMP, POE, ArcSafe DC from the DC systems, I don't think they're going to be viable enough, at least at this stage, to actually secure those circuits. And then on the outside, where you have, again, your 5-volt battery charger, the endpoints themselves won't be able to justify the cost of PoE, FMP, or DC systems either. So that's what I call a DC donut of viability. But I also want to point out, from the cost perspective, there's obviously going to be let's say your 2-pin your 2-pin connectors for the battery charger. So that's cheaper than PoE. And PoE will, for loads that's less than 100 watt, will always be cheaper than FMP, because PoE is passively safe, FMP is actively safe, right? So there's always a cost factor to deciding which technology to use. And the cost is not constant either, right? Because of the scale. One interesting observation is that we know that this is a 2-pin straight, like 18 gauge Romex, right? This is a 23 gauge Ethernet cable. We know it is going to be cheaper to make this than it is to make this, because you have more insulation, you have more twists, you have more strands, all of that. But Ethernet is at such a scale that if you go to Home Depot today, you buy 1,000 foot of Ethernet cable versus 1,000 foot of 18 gauge Romex, it's about the same price.
Interesting. And that's just an economies of scale function. It's become, like, structured cabling has become very pervasive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
So to a point, right, there's in the low voltage, I want to say in the low voltage category, right, anything below 60 watt, you're now seeing innovations that's actually based on the Ethernet, on structured cabling, such as XPoE, right? Because the cabling and the surrounding, I want to say, ecosystem is at such a scale, it's cheaper to actually do things on over here than it is over here. And I think that points to, I think, how much scale or how much improvement in cost we need to get.
Got it. And some of that trickles down to FMP and ArcSafe DC as well, like leveraging like a lot of the lessons that we've learned over the past 25 years with PoE and structured cabling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And FMP, I don't know if we have actually introduced to your audience already, but FMP, this is FMP cable, right? This uses twisted pair. I think 14 to 16 gauge, can actually go all the way down to 14, but it's twisted pair cables, and this is single pair Ethernet cable. Look at the even in color code, they're exactly alike.
Yep.
So
Interesting.
I think FMP has the potential of actually driving down the cost of single pair, twisted pair ecosystem. And then I think it's possible that FMP will be the cost, will drive the cost of the single pair ecosystem down from the power side. And then single pair Ethernet might actually benefit from this and become the more prevalent connectivity medium. It's kind of the reverse. It's interesting to think of it as basically a reverse XPOE, because the connectivity is driving the ecosystem cost down for power delivery on the other side.
That's interesting, because single pair Ethernet or T1L, it's always, we've never really found a real scaled use case for it. But you think that FMP may drive the viability of T1L?
Yes, absolutely.
That
And
makes sense.
And one of the observations is that for I want to say for Cisco single pair Ethernet, like for Cisco and also networking equipment vendors in general, single pair Ethernet may not make a whole lot of sense, because single pair Ethernet typically has a ring topology, right? Which means for entire vehicle or entire building floor, I have two ports that need to connect to a switch, which means you never get the scale that is required by Cisco or any other networking equipment vendors to actually develop a switching product for it, because it actually will be cheaper for the customer to maybe buy just a SPE to regular fiber or Ethernet adapter and get that two ports that way. But with FMP preferring a hub and spoke, needing a hub and spoke kind of architecture, that will drive up the port count, and that might bring some attention from networking equipment vendors to this area as well, and making single pair Ethernet more prevalent and cheaper.
You mentioned a lot of the technical challenges. Was there any political challenges that FMP is dealing with, like what POE dealt with? Who installs it? Where does it get installed? The emergency part of it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, absolutely. As with, I think, any new technology, it has to fit in, I think, I would say not really new technology, but as a critical infrastructure, right? That people need to rely on. You do face skepticisms up front, and also you do face challenges from the policy side, right? And United States, I'm not originally from United States, so it's a little bit new to me that like NEC code or national electrical codes is adopted state by state, and it's not a mandatory. I think we have, last time we looked, we still have states working on NEC 2019 or sorry 2017
older than that.
or something.
Yeah,
older than that. So it was a little bit of a surprise to me that when FMP got codified in 2023, actually with a lot of Cisco input, by the way, that I think in the early in February when we checked, there's only about 17 states that has actually adopted this. But I think with New York and California considering code adoption, I think this year, it's very encouraging. We probably would have covered most of the population centers by end of this year, and that's very encouraging. But it is 2025, 2 years after 2 years after the codification. And also
that's pretty fast adoption though of new code. And I think in some states class 4 and some of these new like restructurings of the code have driven adoption of 2023.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the US. Is there adoption outside of the US? How does that look like?
Adoption outside of the US is interesting. I think Canada, we're working very closely with basically porting the language from NEC over, right? But on the Europe side, it's I think a little bit more challenging. Now we know there are deployments of FMP over there under, I think, under low voltage practice. But I think that's more of a workaround than proper application of like rules or laws by the letter, because FMP, strictly speaking, is not low voltage. It is low voltage practice, but it is not a low voltage technology. I think this is also why in United States, we're looking at regulating it together with class 2 or POE into limited energy, which is a more, I think, appropriate use of language.
Yeah, and are there any organizations, I believe you belong to some, that are pushing or at least educating the market globally to kind of get to mass adoption or scalability, to your point? Can you
Yes.
talk about what that means and who are those organizations that are currently in the forefront of this?
So, I mean, we are part of FMP Alliance, together with Panduit, Belden, VoServer, and the Prismian Group. Right? We have basically companies big and small from both North America and Europe, all together pushing for education and eventually probably talk about standardization and interoperability of this technology. But that's where we are today, still in early conversations. Yes.
Excellent. Was there anything else like from those early days of POE, like late 90s, early 2000s, that we're taking as lessons, with this power, revolution? I know you talked about safety a little bit. Like, are there any other, kind of like foundational elements that that we're kind of reusing?
I think there's a lot of learnings about from POE. I think POE is we use a lot of POE to actually inform our thinking around, I think, the marketing and productization or use cases, and I want to say even go into viability of FMP, because we have seen this playing out in smart buildings, in especially in POE lighting, right? Where POE really is I think from the messaging side, it's really a capex game, right? POE infrastructure today, subsystems, especially for lighting, is basically capex neutral with traditional AC infrastructure. And then we can talk about, the granular visibility and control, the better efficiency, the more, let's say, more capabilities in terms of automation as well. All of that is an added benefit if you're capex neutral. And we find from messaging perspective, that's much easier to accept from the buying centers that we talk to. And that informed our thinking on FMP as well, because FMP, from the capex side, because of its safety, it's also I want to say, a labor for equipment kind of a trade-off, right? And that informed our thinking where the technology is going to be viable today, especially with this technology being new, is likely going to be regions where labor is actually high. This means North America probably is the first one. and then Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea. Those are likely the countries where this will be more viable from the start. Eventually, with the scale, we'll get the equipment cost down, and then that will be we look at expanding into other regions, right?
Got it. So
That's kind of thinking, yeah.
So it's really in economics, and I know in the construction industry, there's a lot of just hedging on risk, right? If a new technology is considered risky, then viability tends to be lower.
Yes.
AK, do you have anything just like coming from the lighting side? Like, do you have anything to add to that, just from like risk and cost?
Yeah, the technology itself, the challenge always, to your point, is the client is looking to make sure that they hedge their risk or reduce their risk as far as deployment, and specifically when it comes to life safety equipment like lighting, etc. So that is where a technology needs to have standards and interoperabilities and scalabilities to make sure that it can be deployed for these specific technologies or these specific deployments.
Cool. And then Andrew, you like as we get ready to close out, you're in Paris recently at DC World, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that show like? I think was this the first year that they have had that kind of tied on to like a BIM sort of a conference?
Yes. It was it was the very first of its kind, actually. And we have actually pretty good interest coming from just people from various side of things. We've had customers coming from shipyards, coming from I think one of the largest MEP firms, I think Equans, in France. And we have like European Commission customers coming over checking this out as well. And also, it's very actually encouraging to see the various ecosystem partners or I want to say ecosystem participants all there as well, right? Schneider DC System is really big over there, and we've had some very encouraging conversations about the viability of all different DC technologies.
Mm-hmm. And like no surprise that the first one was hosted in Europe, where energy is always a hot topic. Was that kind of what a lot of the presentations and the intention of the conference was about, like trying to solve for energy issues in general?
Yes. So DC is looked at, I think, from not just a energy efficiency perspective over there, though. Although energy efficiency is actually quite a big part of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are even looking at it from a overall resiliency perspective, because I think one of the guys are from the Netherlands have basically brought up, like, if you have all of this different, and he's looking at the network from a, like, not even in building microgrids that we are looking at. He's looking at from a long distance distribution, like entire power grid, macro grid, not a microgrid. Mm-hmm. Like, there are still going to be challenges about shocks or the nature of AC distribution is you need to be synced with the frequencies, with the shapes, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you cause undue stress and inefficiencies in the network. And he's looking at that scale, and DC should be considered for even longer distance distribution, and so, which is basically everywhere.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, really thank you for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure. As usual, it's always good to see you. I like the halo. If anybody's watching, look out for the video and look out for that light, the halo. Don't forget to subscribe. Obviously, as usual, follow us, get in touch with us, and put some comments out there. Jason and I will respond, and we'll get you the answers that's needed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jason,
Awesome.
for this opportunity.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good to see you, Andrew. Guys, have a good one.
Always great to see you guys.
Take care.
You too.